Um, I'll take this one. Didn't have a ton of votes, but because it's just something I just talked about. Have you been buying in the information from? Have you begun trying in the information from the Revenge of Geology with the RK theory stuff? For instance, is mass immigration in the southwestern U.S. going to be a cause of breakaway blue states since they're overwhelmed by our selected Mexicans and Central Americans and so on? I have read the Curse of Geography, the Revenge of Geography, and I have last weekend, last Sunday, I did 40 minutes on what on understanding the kind of people that are ruining California. They're also ruining the United States, but they're moving faster here. And RK came up in that discussion for the first time in a couple of years, I would say, publicly. But basically, what I tried to do in that speech was to try to explain to decent, honorable people like conservatives how the left just plain, it's not a question of them feeling remorse or not being aware of things. It's not like the progressives don't know what's going to happen to California. They do know, they just don't care. It's not like they feel guilty about it. They're not capable of feeling guilty about it because they have no sense of honor to be offended. They look at honor and things like that as rules that inhibit suckers. They think that's just something for suckers. That's how their moral thing is structured. And that is based, I think, largely on the RK thing. I remember getting kind of a gasp or something when I talked about the idea that people had always had to be suffered had to suffer domination at the hands of other people, regular people, dominated by kings and barons and dukes and all the rest. And then all of a sudden came this moment in history where we find there's an entire half a planet, there's an entire world that is essentially untouched and open. The Native Americans were not a civilization to the degree that the Europeans understood it. It was essentially an open table. And when America was discovered, I said that if you look at the Western Hemisphere, you'll find that two countries in the Western Hemisphere actually work, and those are Canada and the United States. And then from the border southward, which is why we need a wall, all the way down to the very tip of South America, almost touching Antarctica, everything down there doesn't work. And there's a reason for this. And the reason is that the people north of the Mexican border were settled primarily by English Protestants, and the people south of that border were settled primarily by Spanish, and in the case of in the case of Brazil, Portuguese Catholics speaking Spanish. And that's the difference. And the difference manifests itself in several ways. Catholicism, generally speaking, is a more regulated and a more structured form of Christianity, and that hierarchies are more important I would think, in Catholicism than they are in most Protestant denominations. The Pope is infallible, and below him sits a layer of archbishops and bishops below that, and so on. So it is an inclination towards a kind of a hierarchical moral code. Protestantism, on the other hand, is like saying, "Hey, to hell with all of this." We don't need the gold robes or any of that stuff. If I want to talk to God, I'll go talk to God directly. I don't need your permission or your translation. And that suits itself well to a frontier people. But I think more importantly than that is the motives for why people left their home countries. I made a point of saying one of the things that I always thought was one of my best points ever, and that is that my grandfather moved here from England in 1915, and if there was a Mexican American sitting next to me, and I'm Anglo-American, and his grandfather moved here in 1915, then I said that those two people, my grandfather and this guy's grandfather, have more in common with each other than they do with other Englishmen or other Mexicans. That this country was settled by a small percentage of people who simply were willing to take the risk because the idea of domination was so repugnant to them. that they were willing to take the risk and best case scenario, say goodbye to your family, say goodbye to your belongings, say goodbye to everything and go to the New World. Worst case scenario, do all of that and then get scalped by Indians out on the plains or be eaten by bears and all the rest. And so I said, when you had this open table and people could self-select from all over the planet so that the risk takers and the freedom lovers went to one place which was untouched, then if you let that happen, those people will generate enough wealth and enough security so that society eventually begins to look like an endless field of clover. And that's when our strategy takes over. That's when I'm not going to go into the whole recap. I'm sorry. A couple people have asked about it. I'm just not going to do that right now. But basically, well, I'll give you a short recap. There's a theory that argues that humans, because we're so adaptable, my little addition here is that you're damn right we're adaptable. If you think about it, there's nothing on planet Earth that we don't eat. And I don't think anybody can name another species for which that's true. There are some animals that live exclusively on fruits. Some live on exclusively grass and grain. Some are meat eaters. Some eat insects. Some eat fish and so on. We eat everything. Everything. There's nothing on this earth that humans don't eat. We eat snails. We eat, clams. We eat everything. And that's one of the keys to our success, is being omnivorous. We eat every single thing on this planet. We eat it. That's a pretty big... So I eat PB&Js. I'm with you, brother Trevor. That's my condemned man last meal food is 7 gigantic peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with grape jelly, white bread, and Skippy Super Chunk. Plus some quick chocolate milk to go with it, so I can gum up the electric chair. So we eat everything. And all of this is important, but the fundamental difference between North America and South America is simply this. And this is 90% of it. The religion and the language, all the rest of it, is relatively insignificant compared to this. And that's the motive for why people took the risk to come here, because just sailing across the ocean was a life-threatening exercise. So why would people do it? In North America, well, let's start with South America. In South America, the colonization of South America was driven by wealthy Spanish individuals who saw America as a means of becoming very wealthy quickly, and this is the salient point, and then returning to Spain so that they could live in giant haciendas in Spain and be lords of Spain. That the Spanish conquistadors, I think, pretty much to a person, in terms of the decision makers and the people that were organizing this, went to South America to get gold and then come back and spend it in Europe, in Spain. And that's exactly what happened. Spain became unbelievably rich for a while, and because they were so rich from gold revenues from the New World, just the way that Middle Eastern countries are rich from oil revenues, same effect. It basically crippled Spanish industry and the Spanish Reformation and all the rest of it. They just basically sat there, got fat on all the gold, and it only lasted for 100, 200 years tops. And the next thing you know, they lost everything. Lost their empire, lost gold, lost everything. So the Spanish came to the New World to conquer, to extract resources, and then go home and be wealthy back where they came from. The English, on the other hand, came here to stay. And they didn't come here to get something to take back to where they came from, because they don't want to go back to where they came from. Having, I don't know, a couple months ago, gotten deep into the British Civil War, the English Civil War, I should say, you begin to realize just how intolerable it was for some of these Puritans, and just the bloodbath that launched the big era of discovery on the part of the English. You have Britain's a Catholic country, and then Henry VIII decides he wants to bang this hot chick, and the Pope says no to the divorce. So Henry VIII says, in that case, I'm removing the entire country of England from Catholicism, and we're going to make it our own religion called the Church of England, and it's going to be headed by me. And so you could make a case that Anne Boleyn had historical significance well beyond being the mother of Elizabeth I. So, okay, so now we're a Protestant country. Great. And Henry dies, and then Mary Tudor takes over. She's a Catholic. She burns all of the English heretics at the stake. That's why she's called Bloody Mary. So there's another wave of murders and executions races through the land. And then Elizabeth becomes queen, and then the Catholics are persecuted, not as much as they had done to the Protestants, but it's just, it's 200-300 years of just burning people at the stake, your neighbors at the stake, and the Puritans just said, this is as bad as it gets as far as we're concerned. We're leaving, and we ain't coming back. And that fundamental difference in attitude is what makes Canada and America work, and everything south of America not work. This, baked into the structures of those societies, is that Protestant work ethic in the North, the sense that this is our land, new land, and we are going to improve it, not steal from it and ship it back home and then enjoy it back in England. I think that's pretty much it. So we are a nation of that is self-selected for risk-taking, and it's a fairly rare selection. And back when this was the only untouched area in the world, this is where everybody with that desire went. I'd be surprised if many of you haven't had this thought at least once, certainly during the last 10 years or so. If there was someplace freer than America, I believe I would go there. In fact, I know I would go there. Texas has almost reached that point for me. But there's still the federal government, so if I'm going to be under this flag, I'm going to stay under this flag. But if there was an unknown territory, and that's why you're interested in science fiction, but if there was another new world opened up that was nothing but opportunity and was dependent on people's hard work and their discipline and their courage, I think I'd be there in a heartbeat, and I get the feeling my wife would be right there next to me, and if she didn't want to go, then I wouldn't go. But anyway, that's it.